What's up, guys? Today we're working on a new vivarium project. This is one that I've kind of needed to do for a while. And that vivarium is a Gecko smithii enclosure, so like a proper enclosure. She's been in quarantine for a long time and then just in an 18 by 18 by 24. That's not fully scaped, just some logs, some substrate, a plant, just to keep them happy enough and healthy. But it's time they get a real enclosure. And for this vivarium, I wanted it to go more biotopically accurate. I wanted it to look like their natural habitat. So I had a friend of mine, Lee Grismer, a PhD in evolutionary biology. He's discovered multiple gecko species. He wrote the book on the smithii complex. So there's multiple species in the smithii complex. And I reached out to him a while ago about some information about the geckos, and he sent me some photos about where he was collecting them in Sumatra, Malaysia, Thailand, all over the place. So I've got pictures, and I can attach one maybe, I don't know, here or here or something like that. And it's a lot of upright, trees, not a lot of stuff growing on the ground, and a lot of rock. I'm assuming karst. So we're gonna go with rocky, upright branches. And for those branches, I decided to go with an invasive species. So this big tree in my backyard is a Persian silk, or a mimosa silk tree. They're super invasive. Obviously it's winter, so you can't really see what it looks like, but you can see those big seed pods up there. That's one of the kind of telltale things. They're smaller seed pods, usually about 3 or 4 inches long. It's a beautiful tree, but they're super invasive. But, so since they're super invasive, I've decided to cut it down or kill it. I might girdle it, honestly. I've never done that before. That might be interesting. But anyway, it's got to go. But I found out one very important thing about this tree. The wood is non-toxic, and not only non-toxic, but rot-resistant. So it's perfect for vivariums, ponds, aquascaping, stuff like that. I can't tell you how rot-resistant it is. All I know that it is somewhat rot-resistant. So what I did was I cut a big branch off, I cut it into a few pieces, and I sanitized it as best as I can. This is what's left of the big branch. That's a big oak root that I want to use as vines. It's very long. But going inside, oh God, there's a pit bull in here. Move. I just brought these out of the oven. So we've got a handful of cool looking branches. They're still a little bit warm to the touch, but definitely safe to touch. A little bit crispy now that they've been in the oven. But basically, these are going into a 18 by 18 by 24, so the maximum length of branch I can use is, right around 24 inches. So that fits perfectly fine in my oven. They went in here for 2 hours at about 250 degrees. And that should be plenty of time to kill off any kind of microbes or anything like that. And the combustion temperature for wood, I believe, is a little bit over 400 degrees. So 250 degrees is a very safe temperature to do this at. You just want to monitor it every 10 minutes or so. Make sure, any of the sawdust, maybe from sawing, or any little fibers didn't catch on fire. Occasionally lichens or something like that will just burst into flames. And you don't want that in your house fire. So yeah, I'm going to bring those up here, and we're going to start working up an aquascape with invasive plants. So as per usual, when I'm doing one of these, I like to start off with the centerpiece, basically, and I build around that. It's easier to kind of, when you have so many elements that are going to be coming together in the end to make something, it's a lot easier to start off with the most important part and then build around it. So this one has been secured with just some hot glue, and I've got a little pot under there to kind of elevate it up to where I wanted it to be. All of this is hot glued in place. These two pieces are connected, and yeah, I've got these situated exactly how I want them to be situated. So I'm going to go ahead and start foaming in this base so I can start building up some other pieces back here behind them. All right, so I added one more piece down here while the foam was curing. I've trimmed away a bunch of the stuff that's going to get in the way. Kind of pull this stuff out, lay it on its back, and then I think I'm going to do the stone next, just because I know that's going to be the most difficult, and I don't have a good way to hold the stone in place while the silicone cures, so I'm just going to lay it on its back, add the stone, silicone it in place, let that cure, then we'll flip it up and do the rest of the scaping. All right, so the stone is in. Basically what I'm trying to do with the stone setup is kind of, I positioned one of the bigger pieces in the back because that's going to be obviously the most visible, and then we just tried to situate these guys where there's like about 1 inch to 1/4 inch gap between them, so that's plenty of room for me to just basically jam moss into these gaps and plant, basically. So some of these little bigger gaps will get filled with carbonized cork just because I need to fill that space. But all of these little gaps will just get filled with moss and maybe some vivarium putty or moss putty. This big piece of cork is just a flat, not a flat, but a half of a round. So obviously I've got another one right here. You can kind of see how this works. Half of a round makes a hide. And they really seem to like that. So that just goes in the corner. That's their hide on the warmer side probably. And then yeah, next step is going to be to shave down the edges of this to make it easier to silicone in place, because obviously if I just do a dab of silicone here, a dab of silicone there, that's only 2 tiny points holding those in. So what you want to do is basically take a wood rasp and shave this down so it's perfectly flat. And that makes it a lot easier to attach this firmly. All right, so I've got a wood rasp clamped to the piece right here. This is going to get really messy, so I moved outside. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to shave this on the wood rasp, basically like that. I have to come in from a different angle because this is a really big piece. But yeah, basically you do that for a while and it's going to produce this flat edge that you can use to actually silicone it into place. So afterwards we'll have this much flatter surface. Normally I would do the whole thing and really bring a lot of this material down, but since this is such a big piece, it's not going to be a huge deal. This is, you know, a few square inches of, you know, flat material. Another one of the convenient things, if you're doing a bigger piece like that and you don't do the whole panel or the whole edge, this shows you exactly where to put your silicone. So I can run silicone all along these highlighted spots, fit that into the enclosure, and it'll be a perfect fit. All right, so now we're going to test fit this, see how it goes in. Oh yeah, that is a much more snug fit. Just knock the lid down, but let me show you guys. So that is flat up against there and down here on the back side. Nice and snug on the front. It's matching up on all the edges. And yeah, that'll get siliconed in probably today. Right, so I've got this little pot to set the height. I've got the lid on, so it's all perfect. This is going to be the way that they can come out of this hide, so they have lots and lots of room. The side on this one is going to be heated. So I'm going to give, you know, like it's I believe a 20 inch by 10 inch wide panel. So I'm gonna do it so the heat overlaps a little bit with the hide, but obviously doesn't go all the way to the back. So that'll make it so that basically they have a little bit of a thermal gradient inside the hide itself. So it's not just a hot hide or just a cold hide. Obviously against the panel right here, it'll be warmer than on the other side of the panel. So that'll give them a little bit of a choice if they're cold or warm or whatever. And yeah, so now the time has come to mess with the carbonized cork. All right, so right over here, this is one of my favorite materials to work with. This is a little trade secret, actually. So this is carbonized cork. It's very not easy to find all the time, but basically it is small chunks of cork. Like, you know, you can fragment a piece of cork and you'll have these little chunks of it. They take all of those pieces, they put it in a giant pressure cooker, basically, and heat it up. So the heat draws out the natural binder inside, like the oils, basically, inside the cork bark. It congeals all together, and then as it cools, you get this flat piece of cork that they cut into panels. So basically, like this, it doesn't look like anything special, but, and this is extremely messy, so I'm probably going to get in trouble. You take a chisel or a putty knife or something really flat and a little bit sharp, and you will go in sort of like this. I'm trying to be a little bit. I'm going to do this on top of the table so it's less messy. of pieces just fell on the ground. And I would advise against a chisel. That's a very sharp chisel, and I could very easily slip and have it pop up into my hand. Definitely use a putty knife or something like that. But when you break it apart, this is what you get. Super textured, great, very, very lightweight material. This feels like foam. It's almost like there's nothing here. So very good for building vivariums without adding a ton of weight. I've already added a lot of stone, so I don't want to add any more heavier materials like driftwood that have character. This has a ton of texture to it. It's beautiful. It's dark, so it has a really nice contrast with the other materials that you use, and it doesn't match, so it's not going to be like it's all blended together. It's all one tree. It's going to be a little bit of different. But plants love this stuff. It draws in a little bit of moisture. It's easy for them to root into. It's great. It's the best material that I know of. It's great for building backgrounds, and it's just an awesome product. So you do have to split it down the middle, and that's how you expose this texture, by breaking it. And then, yeah, a little bit of silicone, one little dab of hot glue, stick it in place like that, and let it dry, and that's your whole background. But like I said, it is very messy. I am probably going to get yelled at before this is over. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and silicone the large cork panel in the back in place, and then I'm gonna start working on the carbonized cork background. So that's that for the carbonized cork. You might be thinking there's some pretty big gaps back here. That's very easy to hide with vivarium putty and moss and stuff like that. So really not worried about that. There's a handful of really small gaps between these. It's pretty hard to get like perfect, mated surfaces. Some of these are pretty close, but in the end of the day, this is all going to get painted black anyway, so no light is going to come in. So you're not going to see all of these little teeny gaps. Those will be filled with moss. And also just the light will be blocked. But yeah, that looks a lot better once this gets a light over it. Once we get it situated, the whole thing painted, heat mats on it, this is going to be a really, really, really cool enclosure. I'm loving it already. This stuff is very, very messy. Most of it was able to like keep it on the table. But yeah, I'm gonna go grab the vacuum cleaner before I get into any trouble. Up, and I had the idea of trying to find a way to use all this scrap that I have, and I think I've come up with something pretty cool. I'm going to experiment on it real quick, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bunch of silicone on here. Black silicone would have been great, but I don't have any. And then I'm going to use a glove and smear it all in like that, the old recipe where you would press cocoa fiber into a background, but we're going to use it with this. I think it'll work, but we will see. All right, so I've added the silicone, rubbed that all into the top section there, and we're gonna try just a little bit at first. All right, so it held up pretty well. With a little bit of black silicone, this would look a lot better, or black pond foam, honestly, would help a lot as well. Pond foam's just expensive. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and paint this thing. Paint this thing. We're going with Krylon Color Max acrylic latex paint. That stuff is really easy to work with on glass, and it peels off really, really, really easily if you ever need to remove it. Flat black, of course, just because that's what I like to do. I'm going to leave the other panel unpainted for now. Just gonna do these two because I need to put the heat mat on there first on the side, and then we'll touch up the edges after that one goes in. All right, so the tank is in place. The heat mat is on this side. It just very subtly overlaps the hide here. So the hide itself will have like a warmer side than a cool side. So if they're really cold or something like that, which they should never get really cold, but if they really want some warmth, they can lay flat against the glass behind the hide right here and lay directly up on the heat mat. But yeah, So the mud is in as well. The soil is in. Yeah, you can kind of see the different soil layers in here. We've got leca. We've got a mesh to separate the soil from the leca. My bootleg ABG mix that has perlite instead of tree fern fiber, and like pro mix and a bunch of stuff. And then the very, very top is an actual ABG mix, just to hide the perlite, basically. Before anyone complains about perlite in an enclosure. These are arboreal geckos that are going to be going into here. They're never going to interact with the substrate. And even if they do, we have the top dress of this, and we'll have leaf litter and botanicals on top. So worst case scenario, they jump to get a bug on the ground. They're not, if anything, they're going to get a leaf, not any perlite. You really don't need to worry about soil mixes, like what specific soil mixes you're using, if you're doing arboreal species that are never going to interact with your soil. But yeah, moving on. This tank is ready to be planted. I'm very excited about that. I've got the moss putty in. This is a custom vivarium putty that has chopped up live mosses in it. So this will slowly start to grow out live moss and hide all of that mud. And that brings us over to some plant selection stuff. I've got a lot of tubs and stuff like this with some really cool species in here. Like some of this stuff is extremely rare, and I just let it sit around. And I don't put it in vivariums for some reason. It's like a collection thing. I've got all these tubs full of stuff that I never use. But yeah, so we're going to use some of this stuff today. Begonia bipennataphidum. There's some species T and Quang in here. Definitely going to use this little Labicia. This is Begonia versicolor. It's an actual lithophytic species that you might even find in their environment, or at least karst forests. And then we've got Montes elephantis, another lithophytic species. These grow on rock walls in Africa, so not found on the same area where my geckos are found, but it is a lithophyte, so I'm going to throw it in there because I like it. And then we might use some of the other ones, but yeah, time to get started. All right, so here we are, maybe a week later. Everybody's rooted, recovering, and seems to be doing well. The Arthrostemma species is starting to fill in just a little bit. That'll eventually just fill up this corner very nicely. Solanum julianum here, and little guy in the back, you can barely see this leaf right there, is starting to recover. Burlemark's Fantasy has rooted to this log, so I'm more comfortable letting the geckos come in. The Costas is recovering. It actually put out another shoot down here, and it looks amazing. This is gonna, hopefully it doesn't just overcrowd this tank. I have a feeling it sort of will, but I want it to just fill in this area and maybe a little bit of that area without overshading too much. Begonia bipennataphida down there. Hopefully that grows in, but we'll see. There's not really much else back there other than the Raphidophoras and that Solanum. So Raphidophoras, you can kind of see that big broad leaf that was produced. Same thing with this leaf over here. Those are both Raphidophora labii, very rare species in the United States. And I was really excited to be able to put it in here. I got it from a good friend of mine, Mick Mitty. So that's going to be growing up this back corner and hopefully up along this hide. So that'll just cover up and fill in the back and make it nice and dense. The Begonia prismaticarpa is recovering. It's just finally about to produce its first leaf. Looks horrible, but yeah, that is a little teeny leaf right there. And hopefully it continues to do well. The Montes elephantis you can see there, and the versicolor curled up leaf you can kind of see in the back. Those two did not do well, so we're just going to kind of move on from that. Maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't, but we'll see. And yeah, now at this point it's pretty much ready for geckos. The only other thing we have to do is add some springtails, or I already added springtails, is add some isopods. And for isopods, this is a little bit of a sort of wetter enclosure with the misting system and all that, so we're going with powder white isopods. There's a little guy you can kind of see right there. They are teeny tiny. I normally use powder. Oh, there's a worm in there too. Well, I guess they're gonna go in the tank. We'll see what happens. But normally I would use powder, or not powder, dwarf purple, just because I like the purple ones. But yeah, I could only get the powder whites, or the dwarf whites. I keep saying powder. But these are gonna be going in here. They're a lot more suited to high humidity. All right, so now that we've got this tank ready to go, it's bioactive, it's got plants, not as grown as I would like it to be. I would really hope that the moss was a little bit more grown in and the plants are a little bit more established, but it's time to add the geckos. So the geckos that are going in here are a very, very cool species. Very underrated in the pet trade. And there they are. Oh. I don't know if you can see her. That is Gertie right there. She is a beautiful, beautiful, large, wild-caught Gecko Smithii, or Smith's green-eyed gecko. So I'm gonna let her just kind of hop on out. Here you go, sweetie. And kind of figure things out. And she's gonna be going into this enclosure with one of her captive-born babies. Let me see if I can get this little guy. This is a little teeny baby Gecko Smithii. He's all not exactly in the light right now, but they have beautiful green eyes. He's very dark, doesn't have a whole lot of pattern to him. Let me see. He just hopped off my hand. Okay. There you go. He's trying to bite me. Go on. You're so ferocious. He just fell down onto the plants. So you can kind of see him there. And Gertie is just chilling in the back. And that's the Smithii enclosure done. She's just going to hold on to that worm, I guess, for a little while and decide to eat it later. I'm super excited to see how they adjust to this enclosure. I think they're going to be really, really, really happy. It's more similar to their natural environment, and as it grows in, they'll feel more and more secure. So it's going to be really cool. I have decided I'm going to start doing videos in parts, part 1, part 2, part 3 type situations. This is just way too complex of a build to do in one part. It's chaotic. I am going to be surprised if anyone likes this video just because of how chaotic. Like, I have to keep coming back like days and days later. Oh, now she's eating the worm now that I turned the camera off. Good girl. But anyway, it's just not smooth. It doesn't do well. I can't explain what I'm doing as much because then the video is going to be an hour long. So if we do individual parts, it'll be a lot better. I've got a new camera coming tomorrow as well, so the videos should start getting a little bit better. We'll see. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to see more of this stuff, we'll probably be getting a mail for her soon. Bigger enclosures are coming. I just bought a skyscraper, Zoom Ed skyscraper the other day for another gecko. So that scape is coming. It's going to be really fun. And hopefully I'll see you guys next time.